Some moments don't ask for permission, they rewrite everything. The late afternoon sun hung low over the construction site, casting long shadows across steel beams and unfinished concrete as Olivia Carter adjusted the small portable stove on her folding table. The scent of grilled chicken and garlic rice drifting through the dusty air, mixing with the hum of machinery and the distant clang of metal against metal, her hands moving quickly, efficiently, as if speed alone could keep life from slipping out of control. A paper sign taped to the front of her. Stand reading hot plates. $8 fluttering gently in the warm breeze, and a small boy's drawing tucked beside it. Crayon lines uneven but full of effort. A reminder of why she stood here day after day beneath a sky that never seemed to notice her struggle. Her eyes scanning the workers as they lined up, some offering tired smiles, others simply grateful for a warm meal that felt like something close to home. But Olivia's focus never fully settled, a quiet tension resting beneath her calm exterior, as if she had learned long ago that safety was always temporary, that something could shift without warning. And then it did, a sharp metallic creak echoing from above, subtle at first, then louder, more urgent, a suspended load swaying slightly from a crane arm high overhead, unnoticed by most but not by the man who had just stepped onto the site. Landon Drake stood at the edge of the concrete slab, his presence cutting through the noise without effort, a tailored charcoal suit, untouched by dust, dark eyes scanning the operation with precise calculation, men around him instinctively straightening, lowering their voices, as if the air itself had changed, and then his gaze lifted, tracking the unstable load just as it shifted again, the chain jerking with a sudden snap of tension, his jaw tightening, instincts firing before thought could catch up, his voice cutting through the noise with controlled authority. Move. The word wasn't shouted, but it carried, sharp and undeniable. Olivia didn't hear it at first, her attention caught on handing a plate to a customer, her fingers brushing a few dollar bills, her mind already moving to the next order, until a shadow crossed her vision, fast, unnatural, her breath hitching as something heavy swung into her peripheral sight, her body freezing for half a second. Too long. And then a hand closed firmly around her arm, pulling her back with decisive force, the world shifting in a blur of motion and dust as the load crashed down inches from where she had been standing, the impact sending a shock through the ground beneath her feet, the sound echoing like a warning that came too late. Olivia stumbled, her heart racing, breath caught somewhere between panic and disbelief as she looked at the ground, then at the space she had occupied just seconds ago. Realization hitting in a quiet, delayed wave. She had almost been there. She had almost not moved. And then she looked up, her gaze meeting his. Landon Drake stood close, still holding her arm, his grip steady but not harsh, his expression unreadable except for the sharp focus in his eyes, as if he had already assessed everything about her in a single glance. Olivia felt her pulse spike again, not from fear this time, but from something harder to define. Something about the way he looked at her. Not like a stranger, not like someone passing through, but like someone who had just found something he hadn't known he was searching for. His grip loosened slowly, deliberately, but he didn't step away, his gaze lingering, calculating, and then, almost quietly, as if the chaos around them didn't exist, he spoke. You shouldn't be standing here. His tone calm, controlled, yet carrying something beneath it. Something that made Olivia's chest tighten despite herself. She pulled her arm back, instinctively creating distance, her voice steadier than she felt. I've been standing here all week, her chin lifting slightly, defiance threading through her exhaustion. But Landon didn't respond immediately, his eyes dropping briefly to the small food stand, the handwritten sign, the child's drawing taped beside it, details most men would overlook, then back to her face. Something shifting behind his gaze, subtle but undeniable. That doesn't mean it's safe, he said, and for a moment, the noise of the construction site seemed to fade, replaced by a quiet tension that neither of them fully understood yet, but both felt, sharp and uninvited, like the beginning of something neither could stop. Olivia Carter wiped her hands on a paper towel, glancing at the pile of plates that had begun to stack unevenly on her small folding table, the sweat from the hot afternoon making her blouse cling slightly to her back, and she felt a flicker of frustration mixed with determination, knowing that every meal, she served carried more than flavor. It carried hope, stability, and a fragile sense of normalcy for herself and her son, who waited at a nearby corner sketching quietly on the pavement, the crayons smudging across the paper as if the world had shifted beneath him, and Landon Drake remained near the crane, observing with a patience that seemed both endless and deliberate, his dark eyes following every movement of Olivia, noting the way she adjusted her stance when a gust of wind lifted the lid of her container, the quick glance she gave the customers, the subtle flex of her fingers as she moved plates back into place, each motion telling a story of resilience. And yet his presence cast a shadow of authority that was palpable even in the open air, workers instinctively stepping aside, conversations dropping to murmurs, the machinery noises taking on a rhythmic cadence that seemed to punctuate the tension in the space. Olivia felt the weight of those eyes without fully acknowledging them, her body tensing briefly before releasing, a silent negotiation of space and dominance that neither spoke aloud. And then a truck pulled up, delivering supplies for the construction site, the engine rumbling low, the driver waving at Landon, who nodded once, imperceptibly to most. And Olivia caught the subtle shift in his expression, a hint of amusement beneath the controlled mask, and she felt a pull of curiosity, wondering what he saw in this makeshift stand that had become her lifeline, the hum of activity around them momentarily fading into the background as he stepped closer, careful and deliberate, the ground vibrating lightly beneath his polished shoes, his gaze fixed on the small handwritten sign and the scattered crayons, his lips pressing into a thin line, as if assessing, calculating. Reading the story she had not spoken aloud, Olivia sensed a mixture of caution and unexpected interest in the way he lingered, a silent communication that conveyed recognition of effort and endurance she had not anticipated, and she adjusted the heat on the stove, the sizzle of the food louder than before, hoping to redirect her attention, yet feeling the pull of his scrutiny, the subtle tilt of his head as he watched her actions with precision, the air between them charged with a tension that was quiet but unyielding, a narrative unfolding in gestures and glances rather than words, and then a small moment of imbalance. A paper plate sliding toward the edge of the table, Olivia's hand snapping forward instinctively to catch it, fingers brushing against Landon's palm, which had moved to steady the plate before it fell, a brief contact, electric in its simplicity, a shared acknowledgment of presence and competence. Olivia withdrew slightly, heart beating faster than usual, awareness sharpening, and Landon stepped back, nodding once, approvingly yet without breaking the formal distance, and the boy at the corner glanced up, sensing a shift, excitement and caution mingling in his expression as he returned to his drawing, the crayons dancing over the paper once more, a small universe of color and shapes that seemed to mirror the unpredictability and careful balance of the site around them. Olivia exhaled slowly, the simmering aroma of her food, grounding her as she navigated the unfolding dynamics, her eyes occasionally meeting Landon's in fleeting, wordless exchanges, the sun continuing its descent over steel and concrete, casting golden light across dust and sweat, and in that light, each small gesture, each intentional step, every careful movement of food and plate became a choreography of observation, interest, and restrained authority, a silent acknowledgment that this encounter was only the beginning, a first chapter written in glances and movements, in the hum of machinery and the smell of sizzling chicken, in the careful balance of power and vulnerability that now hung between Olivia Carter and Landon Drake. The late afternoon sun dipped lower, casting long, golden shafts across the unfinished beams and scattered tools, highlighting the dust motes dancing in the air as Olivia Carter carefully balanced a tray of steaming containers while her son crouched nearby. His crayons paused mid-stroke as he watched her, and Landon Drake remained at the edge of the site, observing silently, his posture relaxed yet commanding, dark eyes tracking every subtle movement, the way she shifted her weight, the way her fingers flexed as she placed the food down for waiting workers, the gentle tilt of her head when she noticed a missing utensil, and the slight tightening of her shoulders when a sudden gust of wind threatened to send papers flying, a demonstration of focus and resilience that drew his attention with quiet intensity. And for a moment, the world seemed to contract around them. the machinery hum fading into background noise, the distant chatter of workers muted beneath the current of unspoken connection. Olivia felt the weight of the afternoon heat pressing on her back and shoulders, the small ache in her knees from standing too long. Yet there was a rhythm to her movements, precise and deliberate, as if each motion kept the chaos at bay. While Landon took a slow step closer, his polished shoes making no sound on the dusty ground, the subtle scent of expensive cologne drifting with him, not overpowering but noticeable, and he studied her, noting the careful way she arranged the plates, the way she watched the small boy, protective and aware, and yet capable of allowing him space to create, a balance that spoke of endurance and heart. And he felt a pull he did not expect, a tension that was not mere curiosity, but something deeper, something compelling that anchored him there. And Olivia glanced briefly in his direction, catching the glimpse of an expression that was unreadable yet magnetic, a mix of authority, caution, and something softer beneath, her chest tightening slightly, a flush of awareness, not fear, but alertness, and she turned back to her work, but her hands lingered a second longer over the tray as if trying to steady herself, and Landon noted the subtle rhythm of her breaths. The quick intake when the boy asked for water, the faint tilt of her head when a piece of paper slipped from the counter, the fluidity in her gestures that spoke of experience, necessity, and care, and he realized that these small details, these ordinary motions, told more about her than words ever could. And Olivia caught a reflection in a nearby glass window, a faint silhouette that made her pause, a flutter of unease mixed with curiosity, the awareness that someone was observing not with judgment, but with focused attention. And she felt the pull of that gaze, grounding yet unsettling, compelling her to move with awareness, to hold herself in a certain way, as if every motion mattered. And Landon took another silent step, letting the sound of machinery fill the brief space between them, noting the slight furrow of her brow as she balanced multiple containers at once, the small, deliberate movements of care that kept the food steady, the boy safe, and the line moving, each decision reflecting a strength that demanded recognition. And he understood, in that quiet observation, that her world was measured in effort and attentiveness, a testament to endurance and heart. And the subtle connection between them, unspoken but present, hung in the air like the fading warmth of the sun across steel and concrete, a moment poised on the edge of discovery, awareness, and the first hints of understanding, each glance, each shift, each controlled movement carrying with it the unacknowledged weight of what could become. The sun slipped closer to the horizon, turning the entire construction site into a wash of amber light and long shadows. And Olivia Carter felt the subtle shift in energy that always came near the end of the day, when exhaustion settled into bones and patience grew thinner. Yet she continued moving with quiet determination, her hands steady as she packed another container, her mind already calculating how many more meals she could sell before packing up, how much she would have left after buying groceries, how far it would stretch through the week. And nearby, her son leaned against the curb, now watching her more than drawing, his small fingers gripping a crayon loosely as if sensing that something had changed, that the air between his mother and the man standing across the site carried a weight he could not fully understand. And Landon Drake remained still, his presence unwavering. Yet there was a subtle tension in the way his shoulders squared, the way his gaze remained fixed on Olivia with an intensity that no longer felt like simple observation, but something more deliberate, more focused, as if he had made a decision he had not yet spoken aloud. And one of the site's supervisors approached him, speaking quietly, gesturing toward a stack of materials near the far end of the lot. But Landon barely glanced in that direction, his attention returning to Olivia almost immediately. The conversation dismissed with a short nod, and the supervisor hesitated for a fraction of a second before stepping back, clearly understanding that whatever held Landon's focus now was not to be interrupted. And Olivia noticed it, the way people adjusted around him, the invisible line that no one seemed willing to cross, and it made her chest tighten slightly, a reminder that this man was not just another customer or passerby, that his presence carried influence she did not fully comprehend. And she straightened her posture instinctively, her movements becoming more precise, more controlled, as if she needed to reclaim her space, to remind herself that this small stand, this corner of the site, belonged to her effort, her persistence, her survival, and not to him. And yet when Landon finally stepped closer again, closing the distance with slow, measured strides, she felt that same uninvited awareness return, sharp and immediate, her breath catching just slightly before she forced it steady, and he stopped just a few feet away, close enough now that the details became unavoidable, the faint crease at the corner of his eyes, the way his expression remained composed but not indifferent, the subtle narrowing of his gaze as he studied her, not as a stranger, but as someone trying to understand something that did not fit into his world. And Olivia lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly this time, refusing to look away, and for a brief moment, the noise of the sight seemed to disappear again, leaving only the quiet tension between them, and Landon spoke, his voice low but clear, carrying a calm authority that did not need volume to command attention. "You set up here every day." It was not a question, but Olivia answered anyway, her voice steady despite the quick rhythm of her heartbeat. "Every day that I can." And something in the way she said it, the quiet certainty, the absence of apology, seemed to hold his attention even more, his gaze shifting briefly to the small boy at the curb, then back to her, and Olivia felt a flicker of protectiveness rise instantly, her body angling just slightly as if to shield him without making it obvious, and Landon noticed that too. The instinct, the reflex, the way her priorities revealed themselves without a single word, and he exhaled slowly, as if processing something deeper than the surface of the moment, before speaking again. "This is not a place built for you." His tone was not dismissive, but it carried a weight of reality, of risk, of understanding she had not expected from him, and Olivia's fingers tightened briefly around the edge of the table before releasing, her gaze steady. "It is the place that works," she replied, and for a second, something shifted in his expression, something that resembled respect, or perhaps recognition, and the fading sunlight caught in the space between them, turning dust into gold, turning an ordinary exchange into something that felt like the beginning of a line neither of them could step back from. And as Landon held her gaze just a moment longer than necessary, there was a quiet certainty forming beneath the surface, something unspoken but undeniable, that this encounter had already begun to change the shape of both their worlds. The air grew cooler as the sun continued its slow descent, casting the construction site in long, stretching shadows that turned beams of steel and unfinished concrete into geometric patterns of light and darkness. And Olivia Carter adjusted her apron, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear, her fingers lingering on the edge of the tray for a moment longer than necessary, a subtle pause that betrayed both fatigue and focus, her eyes scanning the line of workers patiently waiting, their faces illuminated by the fading glow, the way they glanced at her not merely for the food, but with a quiet respect for the effort and care she put into each serving. And Landon Drake shifted slightly, his stance firm yet fluid, his gaze unwavering as he watched, noting the way she moved with precision despite the makeshift setup, the way she balanced efficiency with attentiveness, the way her posture communicated both strength and approachability without a single word, the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she inhaled and exhaled, the subtle tightening of her jaw when a gust of wind threatened to knock over a stack of plates, and he felt a pull he could not name, a curiosity laced with an almost imperceptible admiration, and Olivia sensed it, a fleeting awareness at the edge of her attention, attention that she could not ignore, but she continued, adjusting a plate here, sliding a container there, her movements fluid and confident, her son drawing at the corner of the site, occasionally glancing up, a small smile on his face as he watched the interaction unfold, and Landon took a step closer, careful to remain measured, his polished shoes making no sound on the dusty ground, the subtle scent of his cologne drifting through the warm air, and Olivia felt the pull of the moment, a mixture of curiosity and caution, her fingers flexing around the tray, grounding herself against the quiet intensity of his presence. He observed the faint crease in her brow as she balanced multiple containers, the careful precision in the way she moved from customer to customer, the attentive way she noticed a small spill and corrected it instantly. And in that moment, the machinery, the noise of hammers and drills, faded into the background, leaving only the subtle rhythm of her actions, the way she held herself, and the way he noted every detail without judgment, the tilt of her head as she surveyed the scene, the way her shoulders rolled to ease tension, the slight lift of her chin when she spoke to a worker with gentle authority, and Landon realized that this simple act of serving food, this ordinary display of dedication, revealed more about her character than any conversation could, her resilience, her focus, her patience, all etched into each movement, and Olivia, aware of his scrutiny, yet unwilling to show hesitation, continued seamlessly, handing a meal to a worker whose hands shook slightly from exhaustion, smoothing the container with care, offering a small word of encouragement that he responded to with a grateful nod, and Landon's gaze softened, a subtle acknowledgment of her quiet strength, a recognition that the small acts of determination and care in a chaotic environment held weight beyond the immediate moment, and he stepped back slightly, allowing her space while maintaining the invisible line of presence. A silent communication passing between them, unspoken but potent, the shared understanding of effort, perseverance, and unacknowledged admiration, and Olivia felt the faint stirrings of acknowledgment, a sense that her diligence had been observed, validated without words, as the sunlight continued to wane, painting gold along the edges of steel and concrete, turning dust into sparkling fragments of light. And in that illumination, each glance, each motion, each careful adjustment of a plate or container became part of an unspoken dialogue, a narrative unfolding between them with subtlety and precision, a tension and curiosity that hinted at connection, recognition, and something just beginning to form in the space between Olivia Carter and Landon Drake. The golden light of late afternoon stretched across the construction site, illuminating dust motes in the air as Olivia Carter carefully arranged the remaining containers on her small folding table, her movements precise despite the fatigue settling into her shoulders and legs. The warm aroma of grilled vegetables and roasted chicken mingling with the scent of concrete and iron, and she kept one eye on the line of workers while her son crouched nearby, adding final touches to his crayon drawing. The paper smudged and edges curling slightly from the breeze. Landon Drake remained at a measured distance, dark eyes following every motion with a quiet intensity. Noting the way Olivia adjusted her stance when a gust threatened to scatter napkins, the subtle shift in her weight. As she leaned slightly forward to serve a worker, the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she exhaled and inhaled, all movements precise yet effortless, and he felt a quiet fascination, a curiosity mixed with something deeper, an acknowledgment of competence, resilience, and dedication that drew his attention without conscious effort. Olivia sensed a presence, an awareness at the edge of her focus, but she continued seamlessly, distributing meals, offering polite nods and soft words to each person, the small interactions carrying weight beyond the moment. And Landon noted the way she handled the interruptions, a cup tipped slightly, a napkin fluttering loose, adjusting and correcting without breaking her rhythm. The careful attention to detail, revealing a depth of focus that contrasted with the casual movements of the site around her, and the boy looked up briefly, a small smile tugging at his lips as he noticed the subtle attention being paid to his mother. Landon stepped slightly closer, careful not to intrude, yet closing the distance in a way that created a shared awareness. The scent of his cologne faint but perceptible in the warm air, his gaze fixed steadily on her, observing without judgment, recording each movement as if the world had narrowed to the space between them. And Olivia adjusted a container, hands steady, eyes lifting briefly to meet his. The moment passing without words but heavy with unspoken recognition, a silent conversation of presence and perception, her posture straightening slightly, chin lifting in defiance and resolve, and Landon registered every detail. The flex of her fingers, the tilt of her head, the small crease in her brow as she concentrated, all markers of determination and capability, and for the first time, he allowed himself a subtle acknowledgment of admiration, his shoulders relaxing imperceptibly, and Olivia felt a shift in the air, a quiet tension that was not fear but an awareness, a sense of being observed and yet unthreatened, a strange comfort mingled with alertness. She shifted slightly to protect her son, a natural instinct that did not go unnoticed, and Landon recognized it. The subtle prioritization, the care she extended without fanfare, a strength revealed in small, deliberate acts, and the sight noises receded. The hum of machinery fading into the background as if the world had conspired to create a bubble around them, a space measured by gestures, glances, and unspoken acknowledgments. Olivia moved with fluid precision, attending to her tasks while Landon watched, every motion a testament to endurance, patience, and quiet power, and he realized that the simplest acts could hold the most meaning, that her resilience, her dedication, and her ability to maintain composure amidst chaos were commanding attention without any effort to impress, and Olivia, aware of the subtle presence, felt a strange reassurance, a quiet validation of her efforts. The fading sunlight highlighting every movement, every expression, every careful action, the shadows stretching long and golden across steel beams and dusty ground. And in that shifting light, a connection formed not through words but through observation, attention, and recognition, a delicate balance of space, respect, and awareness, the day drawing toward evening. Yet the rhythm between Olivia Carter and Landon Drake continued, precise, intentional, and quietly compelling. The sky had begun its slow transition to dusk, painting streaks of pink and orange across the horizon, and Olivia Carter adjusted the lid on a container one last time, her hands steady despite the weariness in her muscles, the hum of the construction site carrying on around her as the workers began winding down for the day, the clang of metal and the low rumble of machinery blending with the occasional laughter and chatter of those finishing their shifts, and Landon Drake remained at the edge of the site, his presence deliberate and still commanding attention, his gaze fixed on Olivia with the intensity of someone cataloging each detail for later consideration, noting the way she lifted her chin when a gust of wind swept across the site, the careful way she balanced trays and containers, the subtle shift of weight from one foot to the other as she adjusted for comfort, and he felt a quiet fascination, an acknowledgment of the resilience and focus she carried into each small action. Olivia sensed the watchful eyes but did not falter, continuing to hand out meals, offering a word or a nod to each worker, the soft tones of her voice carrying over the sounds of activity in a rhythm that was both precise and calming. And the boy at the corner of the site had set his crayons aside now, observing his mother with a mixture of admiration and quiet excitement, the small sketches on the paper reflecting the chaos and order of the scene around them. And Landon shifted slightly, the polished leather of his shoes catching the last light of the day, the faint scent of cologne mingling with the warmth of the air, and he observed the subtle micro-expressions, the way her eyes flicked to the line of waiting workers, the small crease of concentration in her brow, the way her lips pressed together briefly when a container nearly slipped, but she corrected it with ease, all of it speaking volumes about her capacity for focus and care. And Olivia moved with deliberate precision, every gesture measured, the soft rustle of papers and the clink of containers punctuating the quiet rhythm of her work, a rhythm that Landon noted, absorbing the unspoken narrative of her patience and dedication, and a small smile crossed her face as a worker returned an empty container with thanks, the gratitude in his tone met by a nod and a polite smile, and Landon felt an unexpected pull of warmth, a quiet recognition of competence and kindness that extended beyond the surface of the moment, and he took a step closer, careful to maintain distance yet closing enough to make his presence known, the energy between them shifting subtly, charged with acknowledgment and curiosity. Olivia noticed the movement from the corner of her eye, but did not pause, continuing to distribute the last of the meals, and the boy glanced up at Landon, sensing the silent observation, the quiet approval without words, a connection forming in small, precise motions and subtle glances, the fading sunlight reflecting off steel beams and concrete, casting long shadows that intertwined with the golden glow of the remaining light. And in that space, every glance, every careful action, every small decision to move or adjust or respond became part of an unspoken dialogue, a measured understanding between two people who were beginning to recognize each other beyond mere presence. And Olivia felt a subtle shift in awareness, a gentle acknowledgment of attention and care that was quiet but undeniable, and Landon, watching her, allowed himself a brief nod of respect, a recognition of her strength, her diligence, and the quiet grace with which she navigated the chaos. And as the workers dispersed and the site began to empty, the golden light softened, casting a warm hue across their shared space. The tension easing slightly but not dissipating entirely, a connection lingering in the rhythm of movement, in glances and gestures, in the silent acknowledgment of presence and effort, a moment suspended between day and night, routine and discovery, Olivia Carter and Landon Drake existing in that shared, unspoken understanding as the world around them settled into quiet, anticipation resting gently in the air. The sky had deepened to a rich indigo, the last hints of orange and pink fading behind the distant skyline, and Olivia Carter gathered the remaining supplies from her small folding table, the scent of the day's meals lingering faintly in the cooling air, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she packed containers and utensils, glancing occasionally at the line of discarded wrappers and empty plates. A quiet satisfaction settling in her chest despite the ache in her shoulders, and her son had returned to his drawing, adding the final strokes with concentration, occasionally looking up to see his mother finishing her work, a small smile of shared accomplishment passing between them, and Landon Drake remained at a measured distance, observing with the calm attentiveness of someone who had learned to notice the subtleties in a person's actions, the way Olivia's fingers flexed around the edges of the containers, the small shifts in weight as she moved between tasks, the focused gaze she cast across her small operation as if calculating everything in her line of sight, and he felt a deepening sense of respect and curiosity, an unspoken acknowledgment of her resilience and determination, and Olivia sensed the subtle presence, the quiet intensity that lingered even as the site began to empty, and she straightened her back, the muscles in her shoulders easing slightly as she acknowledged without words that she had noticed, yet her focus remained on finishing efficiently. Each movement deliberate, precise, the rhythm of her day carried into the packing of the last containers and the clearing of crumbs and scraps, Landon's gaze tracking, noting the careful adjustments and the small gestures of care for her son, the attention to detail that marked not only her skill but the thoughtfulness behind her actions. And the boy paused, looking up at Landon for a brief moment, sensing the quiet watchfulness and the subtle approval in his posture, before returning to his final touches, the crayon lines now creating a tiny landscape of vibrant color, mirroring the calm but determined energy around him, and Landon stepped slightly closer, careful to remain unobtrusive, allowing Olivia space while remaining within the bubble of attention he had created around her, the faint scent of his cologne blending with the cooling air, the polished shoes brushing the dust lightly as he shifted his weight, and Olivia's eyes met his briefly, a silent recognition passing between them, carrying the weight of the day, of effort, and of the understanding that had grown from observation alone, and the shadows lengthened across steel beams and concrete, elongating the space between them, yet simultaneously drawing a connection, the subtle balance of proximity and distance emphasizing awareness, respect, and curiosity, the hum of machinery now quiet, replaced by the occasional footstep of departing workers and the rustle of papers and containers, and each glance, each motion, each deliberate adjustment of a plate or utensil became part of an unspoken dialogue, a narrative written in gestures and observation, and Olivia felt the quiet satisfaction of a day completed, the ache in her muscles softened by accomplishment, while Landon noted the way her hands lingered on the last container, the careful attention she gave even to the smallest detail, the grace and resilience that radiated through her actions, and in that space between them, the fading light and cooling air carrying a quiet promise of recognition and unspoken understanding. The construction site now settling into calm, the shared awareness between Olivia Carter and Landon Drake lingering in the air, a delicate balance of effort, observation, and mutual acknowledgment that marked the end of one day and the subtle beginning of something far more significant. The sky had settled into a deep, velvety blue, the last traces of sunlight retreating behind the skyline, and Olivia Carter gathered the final items from her small folding table, carefully stacking empty containers and wiping down surfaces with deliberate attention. Her son tucked away his crayons and drawings, tucking them into his small backpack with quiet pride, and Landon Drake stepped closer, his dark eyes observing each of her movements with a mixture of appreciation and curiosity. Noting the way her hands moved with efficiency and care, the subtle shift of her weight as she adjusted her stance, the slight exhale she released when a plate slid into place. All these small details marking a rhythm and precision that spoke of resilience and determination. And he felt an unspoken recognition forming within him, a pull. That was more than mere curiosity, a quiet acknowledgment of her strength and focus. And Olivia sensed his presence, a subtle energy that did not need to be announced, a watchfulness that was steady yet unobtrusive, and she straightened her back, chest lifting slightly, maintaining the balance between attentiveness to her work and the awareness of him nearby. The faint hum of the city beyond the site blending with the residual sounds of machinery as the last workers packed up and began leaving. Their chatter and footsteps fading into the distance, leaving a calm that seemed almost deliberate, a pause in the world around them. And Landon's gaze shifted to the small boy, noting the careful care with which Olivia had nurtured both the meals and the attention to her child, and he allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile to grace his features, a silent acknowledgment of the care and precision she had brought to the day. Olivia finished stacking the containers and straightened, brushing a hand along her apron, and she felt the quiet satisfaction of a day completed, the ache in her shoulders tempered by the accomplishment and the small victories of each interaction, each careful measure of attention to detail, each word of encouragement or gesture that had not gone unnoticed. And Landon moved slightly, closing the distance enough to acknowledge her work without crowding, his presence steady, measured, carrying the quiet weight of interest and respect. And Olivia felt a subtle warmth at his proximity, a sense of recognition that was neither intrusive nor demanding, but present and undeniable, and she nodded slightly toward him, a gesture of acknowledgment and silent thanks for the unspoken attention, and he returned it with a faint nod, eyes lingering just long enough to communicate understanding. And in that shared glance, there was a recognition of effort, diligence, and quiet strength, the kind of acknowledgment that did not need words to convey its weight. And the boy peeked up at them, sensing the subtle exchange, his small smile matching the pride in his mother's eyes. And Landon observed the detail, the way the light fell across her features, the gentle expression of calm and resolve that she carried despite exhaustion, the subtle confidence in her movements. And he felt a pull toward her that was tempered by respect and admiration. And as Olivia packed the last items into her bag and adjusted the straps, the sight quieting fully around them, the long shadows stretching across concrete and steel, a sense of closure settled, a completion of rhythm and effort for the day. And in that stillness, a quiet understanding lingered between Olivia Carter and Landon Drake, unspoken yet palpable, a connection formed through observation, attention, and mutual acknowledgement. The anticipation of what could come next held gently in the cooling evening air, a delicate tension balanced with respect, care, and the subtle beginnings of trust. As the day drew fully to an end and the first stars began to pierce the night sky,